off with DA Rollins.
Thank you, Devante. So I'm Rachel Rollins. My pronouns are she and her. I am the elected district attorney in Suffolk County, which is in Massachusetts. It's Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere. I am a progressive prosecutor. I'm somebody who has been a prosecutor in the past, but also has siblings who have cycled in and out of the criminal legal system. I am the guardian of two of my nieces as a result of substance use disorder and mental health issues that people I love suffer with and endure. And the lived experience I have is very, very different than many people that usually sit in my seat. Why I decided to run for office is because we have exceptional people that are fighting the good fight as activists, as criminal defense lawyers, and as adjutants, which we need all three of those in a criminal legal system. But they are on the outside looking in to prosecutors' offices. What I want is for people to continue to be exceptional public and federal defenders, activists, and adjutants, but I also want there to be more people to say, and I am going to change a system that is working exactly the way it was set up to work. It's not broken. It is doing everything it was instructed to do with respect to certain communities, poor communities and Black and brown communities. And I want to tinker and change immediately from inside while great people continue to tinker and change from outside. But with the autonomy that you have as a prosecutor, you are able to say on day one, without having to ask the legislature, the governor, the mayor, the city council, yeah, from this point forward, we're not doing that anymore. These 15 types of crimes, I'm no longer prosecuting. Sue me. And they will, and they do, and you win, and you continue to move on. But why I am here today is I want people to see that we need great people on both sides of the V, right? And in the streets, and in the courthouses, and in the legislature, and in all places, including going over to the dark side and trying to work for prosecution and changing internally. That's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to pass it to Judge Calvin. So what's your name, pronouns, location, and why you chose to participate?
Hey, I'm just so great to be in all of these places at the same time with all of you. I'm Calvin Johnson, his and him, I suppose, of mine. I'm a retired criminal court judge from New Orleans. I did that job for almost 18. I quit that job. I didn't retire. I used retired as an adjective, but I quit that job because I couldn't do it anymore. I am now, thank you, now involved with the People's DA Coalition in New Orleans, where we are trying to do what has happened in Greater Boston, elect a DA who is reformed and who can speak as I just heard this reformed DA speak. It says such, she warmed my very heart, saying what she just said. They got 15 things she just won't do no more. My God in heaven, can I quote her, please? That's amazing. And it's amazing for me to be here. And I'm just looking forward to hear what the others here have to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And now I'll pass it over to Yoel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yoel Haile. I'm a criminal justice program manager for the ACLU of Northern California, and I lead all of our prosecutorial accountability project and campaign out there. Good to see you, DA Rollins. Seen you in a couple of the DC gatherings that we've had. But I'm here because, and part of the reason why we're doing this work is because the criminal legal system as it's set up is designed to really, enslave Black people and keep the relationship of the state and Black people in the relationship of slavery, in the relationship of master and subject. And there are many players in how that system is upheld, and chief among them being the prosecutor's office, right? We've scrutinized the police, we've risen up against the police. rightly so. But whenever the police arrest you, nothing can happen to you until the DA decides something will happen to you, and what will happen to you and how long they want to keep you away. And so we've just wanted to really do this project to kind of put the bullseye on the prosecutors' offices, really target them for all the harms and evil things that they have done, and how they're referred to in the streets as the devil's advocates. But I do some teachings at the prisons in California and San Quentin and stuff. And one of the things that are most striking to me is that, when every time I go inside, I'm dealing with people who are my age. Like I'm about to turn 30. I'm dealing with people who are my age who spent their entire adult lives in prisons. And then I'm dealing with, I'm talking with brothers who are like my grandfather's age, who've been in prison longer than I've been alive. And that kind of inhumanity could only happen because of the decisions that prosecutors make when they're charging people, when they're offering people plea deals, when they're pushing for hard sentences, and when they're opposing parole. Right on the other end, after people serve a long time, DAs end up being the people coming back to the parole board and saying that they oppose people having their freedom. And so, I really do this work to really, hold them accountable and get them to change the things that they're currently doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And so now I'll pass it to Helen. Oh, you're on mute, Helen. Uh-oh.
Okay.
There we go.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Jones. I was raised in Watts, California. I'm a community organizer with Dignity and Power Now. My reason for being here today is my son John was beat to death in Men's Central Jail March 30th, 2009. And his death was covered up by 3,000 deputy sheriff. It's a gang called the 3,000 Boy that's housed on the 3rd floor of the Men's Central Jail. He was beat to death by these 10 officers, and his death was covered up by the sheriff department, these 10 officers. Also another officer that name never even got put into the case till maybe 7 to 8 years later. I'm still fighting for justice today to get these officers criminal charges brung on these officers, and have some kind of accountability for somebody to be held accountable for his murder and his death. And these officers have been named in other cases using excessive force, beating other inmates. This happened on Lee Baca's watch, and it's still lingered over to this day in 2020. And right now we fighting to get charges brought on these officers, and so far everything is moving forward. And Jackie Lacey, I'm one of the mothers that started the Jackie Lacey Must Go event at her protest, a weekly protest that we do every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We've been there for like the last 2.5 years. We delivered all kind of stuff to Jackie Lacey, evidence. We've been there for 2.5 years, with the other families, protesting Jackie Lacey, letting her know that she had blood on her hands. She refused to arrest any of these cops, even when she'd been asked to by the chief of police. She still wouldn't prosecute none of these cops. These deputy sheriffs, and she also has all my son evidence. I mean, pictures, photos, investigative report. She has everything, and she's been having this on her desk because I walked it to her office personally with Black Lives Matter and a lot of other organizations, Justice LA. And she has continued to turn her back on the citizens of Los Angeles. And we will stay there with Jackie Lacey, to vote her out. And this campaign against Jackie Lacey is Jackie Lacey must go, because she refused to hold any of these cops, any of these sheriff departments, any of these deputies accountable for what they're doing to, you know, our children out here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just for participants here, this is a nonpartisan event, but we do want to talk about the impact prosecutors have on our communities. And so with that said, I'll pass it to our brother Michael, who's also in Los Angeles.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining and for this opportunity. I'm also an organizer with Dignity and Power Now and the legal coordinator for the Youth Justice Coalition. I'm here because I was heavily impacted by the DA, by gang labeling, and by gang enhancements. And I just got out after doing almost 20 years in prison and 15 of that in solitary confinement based on false gang allegations. So I work with Dignity and Power Now and Youth Justice Coalition to help change policy, to try to abolish the gang enhancement laws. And as we all know from the recent LAPD scandal and LA Times article about the gang database being so faulty and so false and corrupt, and how it impacts folks in my community, Black and brown folks, and sends people away for extremely long sentences for very small crimes just because they're labeled as associates or, you know, people affiliated with neighborhoods. So that is why I'm here. And also, I'm also part of trying to build youth and get more resources for higher education, because that's what also helped me. I'm now a UCLA undergrad. I started in October. So I'm very happy to be out and be a part of this work. And also my pathway to become an attorney and hopefully watch some of this change.
A DA, and become a DA.
When you guys stop doing background checks and using people's, you know, felony convictions to ban us from employment and housing, then we can definitely start talking about working for the county. And I would love to be a part of that change from the inside as well. Thank you.
Devontae, can I just say something that I think will make Michael smile? In a meeting I had today, because these Brady lists, these lead databases, these law enforcement automatic discovery databases, when police officers engage in bad behavior. And I was meeting with all of the members of management, so my commissioners, my chiefs, my colonels, et cetera, and they were outraged that they were being put on these lists and how unfair this was, that they were being labeled with and I said, why is this ringing a bell? Oh, you mean like the gang database, right? Where you can just, because you're relative or you live on a street that your family's lived on, 18, you get 3 points for that. And the gang database, you never get out of that, right? And deafening silence, right? And I say, but at least with our database, we can remove you or put you on, right? But the hypocrisy is very real. But I promise you, that's some of my favorite times at work, when I get to sort of show like, oh, you mean you don't like that? Like when we do this all the time to communities, and because you had a P hat on, and that's the hat your father gave you or your uncle, you're now gang affiliated and you got 3 points in a 10-point system that puts you in, you can't get out of, and your name still remains there even though it's inactive forever.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're going to just jump right in, and we're going to go to you, actually, DA Rollins. A bunch of folks are here to actually get education about what is a district attorney. So can you let us know, what is a district attorney and what is their role in government?
So the district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer of that county or area, meaning, and Yoel made a wonderful point. If the police arrest you, but a DA says, I'm not prosecuting you, in Massachusetts, you don't even have a record of that arrest. The record that is attached to your criminal, your BOP, depending on where you're from, you might call it the Bureau of Prisons, or a CORI is what we call it here in Massachusetts. That attaches at your arraignment. So why it was so important to me to make these lists of 15 types of crimes that are overwhelmingly nonviolent and non-serious. They are quality of life crimes, but trespass, operating on a suspended license, shoplifting, many of these crimes that are overwhelmingly, not always, but overwhelmingly committed by people that are having some sort of, have a mental health issue, substance use disorder, food or housing insecurity, or homelessness. Add to that exponentially more during COVID-19 and all of the additional pressures we're finding with evictions, foreclosures. Many of our people in our community are now, you know, we've always known it, but the rest of the world knows they're the essential workers above and beyond the police, fire, and EMS. If you work in a restaurant or a supermarket, if you are in transportation or sanitation or work at a hospital, you are keeping all of us alive right now. You have children. Many of your kids are English, our kids, not yours, are English language learners or on an IEP based on real reasons or non-real reasons. So you look at all of these external factors that impact that. And what I said was, let's imagine a system where instead of the presumption being jail, let's start with the presumption of dismissal or deferral to a state, local, or county agency, right? These are societal failures. And the criminal legal system has been asked, and many of us have jumped forward and said, we'd love to, because the answer to everything for us is jail. And you aren't getting better. In fact, you're getting worse. You come out more violent because the currency in these places isn't love and hope and promise, right? It is violence and, I don't know, essentially you are enslaved, right? You are put in a cage and tormented. And to hear, Michael, that you spent, that many years in solitary confinement, what is the rationale for that? If 95% of the people we send away come back to our communities, and we are sending them away and harming them so they come back more violent and more damaged and traumatized, not as people, but because we have damaged them. They are not damaged people. We have harmed them where we sent them. How are we surprised when our recidivism rates are in the high 60s, right, and 70s? So DAs are responsible for overwhelmingly in the past prosecuting, and that's it. What I want my office to think of is we are the catch basin at the end of these societal failures. Let's see if we can let this person back to the community. And what's tough as a progressive prosecutor, where we have problems, Yoel, is even with our good hearts, and we think, oh, no, we're just like you, but we're prosecutors now. We want our budget bigger. We want more this and more that, because we say, but I'm a good person, give me more money. No, I have to constantly check myself to say, no, the community gets to decide what they want, right? Let's empower people like Michael and Yoel and Helen and Judge Johnson, who are activists and involved in the community, to determine what it is that they need, instead of me dictating down and saying, I got this, give me more money. When we say defund the police, let's put funding into community so that they can be set up to actually allow people to get the training, the counseling, the service, the treatment that they need to have dignity and humanity and the ability to self-regulate, right? In a way, of course, where there's hopefully not harm happening. And Helen, to hear your story and to hear that your son was murdered 11 years ago, and that you are still waiting for either a response from the DA's office, is why I created the discharge integrity team, where there's a community member, a criminal defense lawyer, a retired judge like a Judge Johnson, and an active member of law enforcement. And I am the fifth member. We don't even meet in my office, and we make the determination as to how that investigation happens. We are transparent and open about what we're doing. And Helen, I had 3 families in a situation similar to yours, where previous DAs, not me, because I've only been in my job for about 20 months, have asked for me to take a look back to see if the DAs got it right. And I said, of course I will, right? Who am I to look at people that I don't know and didn't trust to say, no, seems like they did it right. The problem with our system, Devante, is we hate looking back. We believe we never make mistakes. And I defy you to name an industry that is perfect. And what we have seen is in LA and elsewhere, you know, I look at George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, that was 2 groups of murdered Black people ago, right? And brown people ago. Is, for me, I'm 49 years old. The first George Taylor to me was Rodney King, right? March 3rd, 1990. 1991. March 3rd is my birthday. It happened on my 20th birthday. And for me, that was the window that a lot of people got into what the lived experience were for many of us in our communities. Maybe I wasn't from LA, but I had family members that had been, you know, an eye socket broken by the police when they were, you know, getting arrested for something. And it's just the maiming and harming of our bodies is just, you know, commonplace. So I look at sort of the words that I choose, the way that I choose to lead, the way that I do a lot of the trainings for my staff, myself, because I want them to see a face with melanin, a person that talks about having visited loved ones in carceral facilities, not as the DA, but as a family member, right? So when law enforcement tells me things are working out great, I can say back, no, they're not, because I was there as a person and was treated terribly, and I've been treated terribly as the DA. So I choose to lead differently as the DA, but who we were before is only prosecutors. Who we are now, I hope, is members of the community that are explaining the system far better to the community so they understand how important their vote is regarding who the person is sitting in this seat, right? And our communities might want to think about a president or a governor or a mayor. We need to recognize in certain communities who your DA is more important than every one of those positions, if not combined.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we do want this to be engaging for folks, and we do want to hear from you. So I'm about to drop in the chat. What's the name of your local district attorney, and what impact are they having on your community? And while you chat that, I'm going to pass it over to Yoel at the ACLU to talk about prosecutorial accountability and the power prosecutors hold. So my first question is, what power do prosecutors hold, and how has sentencing practices impacted Black communities?
Yeah, and I think Jay Rollins covered a good amount of that. But just to kind of summarize, I mean, mechanically, right? As soon as you get arrested, the DA then gets to look at the arrest record and decides what charge to file, right? And in that, there's wide discretion in that they can charge you. I mean, the California Penal Code is like this thick, right? For doing one thing, they can charge you with 8 different penal code violations. But there is significant discretion in how they decide to charge you, how based on the charges that you face, then you're looking at various scenarios, right? So in California, for example, for every charge that you catch, there's a bail amount there's a dollar amount listed to the offense, right? And so what that means is, let's say you get arrested for whatever, then they charge you with like 3 different things, and each charge has like, $20,000 on it, right? All of a sudden, you're looking at $60,000 to bail out. The only way to get out of that, to get out of jail, and mind you, at this point, you're just accused, right? You're legally innocent. You're not guilty of anything. The police are simply accusing you of doing something. Now you're looking at a $60,000 bail, where you can only get out if you either put something as collateral that's worth $60,000, which most people don't have, or give a 10% non-refundable money. So that's $6,000 you give them away, and you never get it back, even if you show up to court. And the only purpose of bail is to make sure you show up to your actual court date. And who has $6,000 sitting around, right? Like, studies show that 50% of people in this country are like, we don't have $400 in our bank account, right? That everybody is like one emergency worth $500 away from actually going into debt, meaning having to use credit card or having to borrow money from somebody. But if you can't afford that, then what you're left with is you're going to sit in jail until they decide to hear your case, right? 3 days until they arraign you, like 7 days until your like first preliminary hearing or something. And during all this time that you're in custody, right? If you have a car and it gets parked somewhere and nobody goes to pick it up because you got arrested, you got picked up, right? Your car is going to get towed. If you have kids and you left them in daycare and you never come back, to pick them up, and you never managed to get a hold of somebody to pick them up, now you're looking at losing custody of your kids. If you have a job and obviously you're not going to show up and you're not going to be able to call your job and say, yo, I got arrested, you're going to lose your job. So the consequences that happen to people's real lives are significant, right? And that's kind of where the power of the DA really lies. Is it's not just saying this is what we're going to charge you with and now we're going to go prove it, right? That every step of the process that you're going through, there's real material harm that you suffer, because if you lose all these things, even if your case gets dismissed, now you're out of $6,000. You don't have a job. You may have lost custody of your kids. You don't have a car, or if your car is towed, you got to go pay another like $200,000-$300,000 to get your car back. So you're further in debt, right? And these are the things that happen, assuming you don't even get convicted of anything and you're actually innocent, right? Like now, if you're facing actual exposure, right, any sort of jail or prison time, then you're looking at, like what Michael's talking about, all the enhancements that DAs have the power to make, right? Gang enhancements in California can range from like 3 years to lifetime, like life sentences, right? And that's just for the enhancement. And that's not even for what you supposedly did, right? Gun enhancements go 10, 20, 30 years in California, right? So, and what, when they add these enhancements on top of what the punishment is for what you allegedly did, what we're looking at then is anybody facing like crazy amount of years. And I think, there's two issues, right? One is the actual use of long sentencing to coerce people into, pleading guilty, even when they're innocent, or even when, just to avoid the risk of going to trial and having to face 80 years, you'll just take a 30-year deal, right? Even if the actual offense is, let's say, worth like 5 years, right? The DA will come to you and say, if you plead guilty, you'll take 5 years and you go away. If you make me go to trial and do my job of proving that you're actually guilty, now I'm going to seek like 40 years, right? And now when any rational person is not going to go and be like, even if I'm innocent, I'm innocent, but I'm not going to risk 40 years if I can just, get rid of this particular situation by 5 years or 2 years or whatever, right? And that's the kind of overwhelming power that prosecutors have, that they leverage in everyday, like doing their jobs, decisions that they make, right? Like every small decision that they make, that they're just like, oh, this is just me doing my job, actually has significant like social, financial consequences for people. And I think what it underlies though is that a system that actually gives them that power is the actual problem, right? That any 25, 26-year-old white kid who grew up in the suburbs, never dealt with Black people or like Latino people or anybody else, right? Grow up in a suburb, go to a white college, go to a white law school, graduate, become a DA, all of a sudden you're dealing with all these Black people you've never actually interacted with, and you're making decisions that completely decimate like communities, right?
And generations,
And generations, right? And I think part of what that speaks to is an actual legal system that bestows that kind of power on any given agency, and that systematically creates opportunities for one group, one office, or one government entity to continue levying generational continual harm on Black people and other people of color. So I think that's the kind of power that they have, and that they leverage against our people.
And then add to that, now we're seeing with all the immigration consequences as a result of minuscule, right? Minuscule problems. And we focus a lot on sort of Latinx culture there, but we have a massive Cambodian and Vietnamese population here. They are dealing with immigration consequences as well. It is any immigrant with melanin, right, is being sort of pushed out with this narrative of violent criminal, right? But certain, it's our president saying certain shithole countries, excuse my language, right? And that's the sort of focus there. We're in Boston. You can't walk without finding somebody from Ireland here that I would put good money is not here on an active visa, but the police aren't targeting or looking at that individual like they might me or someone in my family, which is, Barbados and Ireland is where my family is from. And our distinct families are treated very differently when it comes to potential immigration consequences. Where a DA can be incredibly powerful, things I'm really proud of, is fighting to make sure we are the first state in the United States of America that sued ICE and said, you cannot make civil, federal, administrative arrests in and around our courthouses, because ICE loves the narrative of, oh, we're arresting violent criminal. No, you're not. You're arresting somebody who had an administrative infraction maybe 20 years ago and is actively coming to court for something else. They're going into databases, right? ICE is delving into state and local databases to see when Rachel Rollins is going to be in court. I go through the metal detectors, and that's when they take me. And when you are civilly arrested, people, hear me now, constitutional rights don't attach, right? They don't have to bring you to an Article 3 judge or a magistrate in the federal courthouse. They put you in a van and we don't know where you are, right? You go to an administrative judge where the procedures are terrible. You might not get a court-appointed lawyer, and the consequences are dire, right? We brought up to our Supreme Judicial Court the Bilal case, where a young Somalian man, had spent, I think, 2 days, 48 hours in Somalia as a child, then was in Saudi Arabia, and then ultimately came to the United States. This state was going to deport him back to Somalia, a place he hadn't been in 27 years. And we moved and fought to null pros his underlying charge that would have been the thing that was the linchpin to deport him. When you have progressive DAs, we will look and see if, in the interest of justice, if Judge Johnson did something 17 years ago that is a deportable offense and has lived a life since then that has not, harmed, or if he's moved on from that situation, why wouldn't I say, how can I help to keep you here, right? The place you've lived, the place you call home, the place you've raised a family. That's the importance of DAs as well. We have a lot of power. I don't have to ask permission for that. We can move through the process and assent to motions with the defense. And this is when judges' brains explode, because they're not used to that. They're used to prosecutors opposing everything, appealing every decision. And where I'm trying to change culture in my office is to say, well, just because we can appeal doesn't mean we must appeal, right? And just because we normally oppose, why can't we assent to or join this motion for a new trial for this individual and then null pros the case because every black juror was struck from their jury and it's a cross-racial murder that happened 49 years ago, right? These are the things I'm proud of that we're doing. And it is not easy to do, because police unions and police and conservatives will come with everything they have against you to say you're anti-law enforcement, get her out of here, sue you, do other things. You have to be strong when you do it.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely want to have Michael and Helen and Judge Johnson hop in too. But before we move on from Yoel, I did want to take some time to hear you talk about what is prosecutorial accountability and how can we make a difference in this actual election cycle, and what also does a long-term work look like when we're talking about accountability?
Try to keep it brief too. I know we're short on time. So I think the way we have been doing prosecutorial accountability in California, it varies, right? Like there is an incredible model our partners at Silicon Valley Debug have developed called participatory defense, where the community and the family actually participates in like developing the defense with the defense attorney, right? And making sure that there is mitigation packet, social bio packet that's included, that any helpful facts or helping the family walk through the process, right? That's one of the ways that a lot of our partners have been doing prosecutorial accountability. Another way we've been doing is, depending on who the DA is and their willingness to engage with the public, we've had regular meetings with a couple of DAs in the Bay Area every month or every other month, where we're pushing for specific changes in policy that are happening in the area. So like speaking of like immigration, for instance, the Alameda County DA's office immigration policy explicitly said that the DAs were allowed to try to get longer jail time or longer probation time in order to give like an immigration safe plea, which means like in order so that they don't convict you of something that can get you deported, right? Like you can get deported for like DUIs, petty theft, a whole host of like nonsense charges, right? So like in order for them to kind of not charge you with those things, that they were actually allowing them in exchange for that, then to keep you longer in jail or to keep you longer on probation, which carries like additional punishment simply because you're not a citizen. So we were able to push the Alameda DA to change that policy, and we just got a copy of that last week. We also push her to not receive and solicit money from the police unions. The Alameda DA had received like thousands of dollars from police unions, from police department, from police unions whose officers were under active investigation, gave money during the campaign in 2018. And it was a huge scandal. And, we've gotten a commitment that she will never accept police money anymore. So it kind of looks like that in some counties. It includes court watch. So it varies, but the bottom line is really, one, walking with the families who are actually going through like the process there, whose loved ones are being prosecuted right now, walking with them, really figuring out ways to get the best outcome possible for their loved one, having these policy conversations and policy demands, and then implementing them, and then monitoring the courts to see, what the DAs are doing. We have a DA in Alameda County who gets paid $200,000 a year, who during one of our court watch sessions, we observed that he was demanding that somebody who stole $20 worth of wet wipes spend more time in jail, right? And like it may not necessarily be in the policy, but when you go to court and actually see what's happening, that's what's happening, right? And then you got to deal with that individual, and also you got to deal with the policy or the culture that allows him to do that stuff, right? And I think the last point I wanted to make is part of, related to the defund conversation around police that was mentioned earlier. Part of what we're seeing is that over 60% of most DA offices, over 60% of the cases that they're prosecuting are actually misdemeanors or other low-level felonies, right? So, they will try to tell you, oh, we're dealing with violent crimes and, murders and rapes and all this. It's actually false, right? And we looked at the entire docket. It's about 60% in 3 separate counties: LA, Sacramento, Alameda, and I'm pretty sure it's the same elsewhere. Over 60% of the cases they prosecuted over 2 years were all like either misdemeanors or low-level felonies, right? And even from the serious and violent felonies as defined by our penal code, it's like less than 10% serious and violent felonies that they're prosecuting. And even within that, the most common serious and violent felonies are robberies and burglaries. And there are robberies and burglaries that could be actually diverted through restorative justice, right? And other diversion programs. It just depends on the specific facts of the case. But there's categories of robberies or burglaries that are poverty related or that could be resolved through other means than just incarceration. But all of that to say, if we're looking at 60% low-level prosecutions, right? And let's just say we take half of that. So we're like, let's say 30%, right? If we just defund 30% of that DA's office, right? And let them have the other like 30% to prosecute other like misdemeanors or whatever, or to manage it, right? In a place like Sacramento County, where the DA budget is $60 million, 30% defund, we're talking about $20 million every year that could go to the community, that could pay for housing, that could pay for social services, that could pay for universal health care for kids and pre-K and all these things, right? And that's what can be done because those things actually address the underlying issues that people face that may get them involved and stuff.
And let me push back though and say, Yoel, and the police, right? Like if people aren't, so the same way I can say no to a prosecution. I'm not just prosecuting people. Remember, in the DA's office, it is 95+% reactionary. We, unlike the US Attorney's Office, the federal government that I used to work for, were easily, on the criminal side, I would say 60, 75+% of it is proactive. It's them looking and doing research and data, or the FBI, ATF, DEA, targeting people, wiretaps, doing all the work, and then a big takedown and a bust. I look at these baby budgets of DAs. Boston Police Department has an operational budget of $414 million. In another place, we found that it has a $60 million above and beyond that overtime budget. And I really believe that government, you shouldn't need the Nobel Peace Prize in economics in order to read a city budget. You should be able to type in Boston Police, and every funding that goes to them should pop up, and the community should be able to know. You don't have to have a PhD to understand it. And that is where I think, believe me, take our money too. But I'm saying my little $25 million budget for my 350 employees is nothing compared to the $480 million budget of the Boston Police Department, which is 2,100 officers and then tons of other civilians as well. So don't forget that too.
Yeah. Yes. And
yeah. Well, we've been talking about kind of broadly what DAs are doing and also what's happening in Northern California, in Suffolk County. Now I want to take it to Michael in Los Angeles, just to tell us a little bit about Dignity and Power Now, what it is you all do, and also how is Dignity and Power Now making change when it comes to DAs and also the pre-trial phase specifically. I know you all are doing work around that.
For sure. Thank you. So Dignity and Power Now is a grassroots organization that helps to support family and incarcerated people who are victims of state-created violence. Folks like Helen and other family members. We also work with DBUG, especially my training through the Youth Justice Coalition as legal coordinator on participatory defense, which is huge. It makes a huge difference when the judge and jury sees family members coming in and other folks from the community providing, letters of support and such, and also keeping up on for those of us that have a little bit of legal knowledge on what's supposed to be done, what the DA is doing, and also engaging with community and educating community on the power of the DA. And for instance, in LA, organizing family members to lift up their voices and let it be heard about, holding Jackie Lacey accountable for the police shootings and the failure to prosecute all these corrupt and killer cops. And so I think that's an important part of the work, and also helping family members with getting reports from like the OIG's office, the Inspector General's office, and a lot of the stuff that typically family members won't receive from, folks like at the prosecutor's office when a family member is killed, and also helping them get those resources that is often denied to them as well through victims' compensation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about the important work y'all are doing. And I did want to pass it over to Helen, just to talk about how folks can get involved and support the work of Dignity and Power now? Is there any volunteer opportunities coming up? How can folks plug in?
Yes, there is volunteer opportunity. Right now, we working with the Black Futures Lab, using the Outvote app. And what we're doing right now, we need volunteers. Anybody out there want to volunteer and help us reach out to, folks, to get folks involved in this process and to take a pledge to vote in 2020 this year. And so anybody that want to vote, they can send their email to the chat, and we will reach back out to you and let you know when we will be starting our Zoom party. We're going to host a Zoom party to where a lot of people, whoever want to join, whoever want to be in this, the Zoom party, they can come in, and we will teach you how to use the vote, the Outvote app, and have a good time while we're doing it. And then also, we can also talk about if you want to further volunteer with DPN. And we love to see everyone there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. And so, yeah, folks who want to volunteer with Dignity and Power Now, definitely chat your email and we'll make sure to give that to them so they can follow up. Thank you so much, Helen and Michael. And I do want to get back to the chat. I know folks have been listing a lot of important work that you all want to see in your community and how prosecutors have impacted your community. I do want to pass it over to Judge Johnson to talk about what's happening in NOLA. So I do want to ask, who is the People's DA Coalition and what issues are y'all prioritizing this election cycle?
The coalition is 30 organizations and individuals who come together to do what, to get a DA to do what DA Rollins is doing, to be able to and to figure out ways to address what Yoel is talking about in terms of those kinds of misconduct that he sees in California. I'm just amazed though to see how, with all respect, Californians, how bad off y'all are. I thought, since I'm in the Deep South and have been in it for 74 years and have seen what racism looks like straight up, because we don't hide our stuff. We just be straight up with who we are and how we are. So all of us thought that places like Boston and California was, the Mecca. You could go to Boston and live good. We could go to Sacramento or to LA or to Oakland and live good. Then all I can think of after listening to all of you, y'all need to come to NOLA. Y'all need to know what it really means to just miss New Orleans. Y'all need to come here. The DA Coalition has come together to actually set a plan that is a playbook for what a DA should look like, what a DA should do, what a progressive district attorney should be, and how we can define that, not only define it, but how we can set pieces up so when that new DA is elected, we can measure what that DA has promised to do and what that DA has done. And not only can we do that, but we can have it such that the DA that person elected, whoever that person is now, but has been in all of these other places being recorded in terms of what they will do and how they will do it once elected. So we want accountability. We want transparency. We want ethical practices. We want a DA who will not do like we learned how to do from California, employ 3 strikes and you're out. That is we want a DA to say that will no longer happen in the city of New Orleans. We want a DA to say, and this is all in a platform, that we will no longer use the death penalty in the city of New Orleans, because in Louisiana, we still kill people. But in New Orleans, we want our DA to agree that will no longer happen in the city of New Orleans. We want our DA to agree that they can not only talk about restorative justice practices, but they can define what the restorative justice practices are and how they will implement them. We want a DA to agree that we will no longer prosecute, as DA Rollins don't prosecute, those quality of life kinds of offenses. We will no longer bring low-level drug offenders, possessors of drugs, into the state court, into that kind of felony kind of court thing. We will no longer do that. We will look at health issues, be it drug issues, that is addiction issues, be it mental health issues. That is, the DA will look across those kinds of issues and be sure that those people who come with those issues are not prosecuted because they're sick, but are placed in places where their sickness can be dealt with. We will look, that is, the DA will look at those things that exist outside of justice, but have been geared to determine the causes of behaviors that get people into the justice system. The DA will look at those people who have defined what those things are and become the advocate for the society at large to deal impactfully and effectively as regards those kinds of issues, utilizing funds, funds outside of justice to do it. And as DA Rollins suggests, not have their office full of money to do what they can't get done. Not have money in their office that they can use to do what they can't get done, which is to make life better for people outside of it. So the platform, and all of you folk from all over America, you can look at it at nolapeoplesda.org. That's one word, nolapeoplesda.org. And I'm gonna say it one more time, so this will be 3 times, so you all will hear me 3 times. It's nolapeoplesda.org. You can look at the platform. This is what we are presenting in the city of New Orleans. This is what on tomorrow night in a forum we are having with the 4 candidates. This is what they will be grilled on, and we will get them videoed, and we will get their voices heard, and we will get it known what they said as regards all of these issues. We will have that done. But our forum will not simply be us questioning them, but everything that I have mentioned in terms of issue before a question in this forum is had as regards it, there will be data on the screen that people will see that reflects why we are asking the question. Why we are asking a question about 36 individuals in New Orleans who have been exonerated over the last 20 years. 36 people. Now that may not sound like a lot, but our town ain't big as 3 blocks in California. So that's a lot of people in the city of New Orleans who have been exonerated because of prosecutorial misconduct. So we will have that. We will have the fact, though, that we have more people in jail from New Orleans in terms of how they have been misprosecuted, but more people in jail of color than there are per capita than anywhere else on earth. Then we will have that kind of data on the screen that reflects why it is DAs, we are candidates for this office, why we're asking you these questions. Because it is not simply to ask them a question about something and get them committed to some answer to it, but it's more important to educate the people who are watching this, listening to this, but to educate them as regards these issues. Because as we are doing on this piece, we are educating those people who were here as regards these issues. And that's the beauty of Zoom, in all honesty, but that to be ability to educate people as regards these fundamental issues that D.A. Rollins talks about, that Yoel talks about, that Ms. Jones, you talk about in terms of mistreatment, and Michael, you talked about, but to educate people as regards these fundamental issues. And so when they leave these kinds of settings, they can go out in their own communities and talk about, and I'm gonna use the S word here because everybody grown, that shit just wrong. And we need to stop doing this. We need to stop doing this. We need to stop allowing government to do these bad things to people. We need to stop doing it. We are all people and government ain't. And we need to stop allowing government to do all these bad things to people. That should always be our goal. And I'm out of breath, y'all. Oh yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I appreciate that. We did have a direct question about the forum in the chat. Can people outside of NOLA join, and will it be on Zoom?
Absolutely, you can join again on the website. You'll find a way to join on our Facebook page again, nolapeoplesda.org, NOLA Peoples DA. The Facebook piece, you'll find a way to join. And I know it's on Twitter and Insta. I like saying that. It sounds like I know what that is. It's on Twitter and Insta, and it's on all that kind of stuff. And you can find all of that way to hit that link and do that. And what I will do though, I'm gonna show my talent. I think I am. I'm going to find the link and put it in chat. I hope to succeed at that. Before this is over with, I'll find the link and put it in chat.
Thank you so much. And I found some links and dropped them in to the platform and the website you all have. But
Devontae, I'm sorry. Can I just add one thing that I think is really powerful that DAs can do as well? I participated in my first parole hearing about a month ago, and I have written letters in support of individuals that were up for parole, but I've also written one letter not supporting the parole of an individual. And remember, what's a little bit different about the role of the district attorney is, most prosecutors' minds explode when I say this, but defense counsel is myopically focused on their client. That's it. They have to zealously advocate for their client. I have been a defense attorney. I have done it. Prosecutors are the Commonwealth, right? It's the Commonwealth versus Rachel Rollins. And I like to explain the Commonwealth includes, of course, not only the victims and survivors, but the community and the defendant and the families, right? Now, the defendant has his or her own counsel, but the Commonwealth, we have to make decisions based on the community, right? And what is bigger than just an individual that we are doing. Every decision I make with respect to parole, I speak to the families of survivors. Every decision I make with respect to my integrity review bureau, and remember, most DAs have a conviction integrity. Even conservative DAs have conviction integrity. They might not do anything, but they have a conviction integrity unit. But conviction integrity for the non-lawyers here is, Michael, we know that for the last 30 years, you've been telling us you were innocent. Wow, it appears you were right. Sorry about that. We're gonna let you out and good luck with your life. Now, you don't get any of that time back. Conviction integrity is looking back at a process way too far down the line. Now, you bet we better do it. But I also have sentencing integrity, which is often when Rachel and Yoel engage in a joint venture. It is undisputed that Rachel pulled the trigger, but Yoel drove us there and knew maybe what I was going to do. In my mind, even though we are both culpable regarding this, I took several affirmative additional steps than Yoel to get out of the car, walk up, pull out my weapon, or do whatever I did to commit a homicide or kill somebody. We both get offered a plea, and I take the second degree. All right. In Massachusetts, we no longer have the death penalty. So I am parole eligible in 15 years. Yoel says, look, I'm not an angel, but I did not kill anyone. I believe I have different defenses than Rachel. Sometimes we do something called a locked plea, which is even more inappropriate, where Yoel and Rachel, you each have to take this or the other one doesn't get it, right? But anyway, so I get parole eligibility. I'm out in 20 years. Yoel gets found guilty of first-degree murder, serving life without the possibility of parole, right? That's sentencing integrity, where I don't think that's fair. We look at that. I also have something now called case integrity, where in real time, when the following things happen, it moves from the entry-level assistant district attorney who's 25 years old and 9 minutes out of law school, or 3 years out of law school, but handling matters where they can felonies, right? People can do more than 2.5 years incarcerated, and not like under 2.5 years is a cakewalk. Anytime we get to take away your liberty, that is a huge responsibility that we have to be better on. Case integrity happens when a grand jury no bills. I want to know about that. Not so we can do anything to appeal, but why are we wasting our grand jury's time on cases where we can't even meet the low-level hurdle of probable cause, right? So that's a no bill we get told about. Any motion to dismiss that is granted, motion to suppress that is granted, any Batson or Soares challenge that is sustained, that's when we are challenging jurors and a defense attorney says, really? So every person with a Latinx surname or a Vietnamese surname or anyone with melanin, you're striking all of those people. If they're in our state, it's Batson Soares. Any sustained challenge I know about immediately, mistrial, directed verdict, or a flip on appeal. So we can't just write the Rollins memo and have me crip walk away like I'm the best DA in the history of the world. If I don't train people on my policies and then have an audit function where I am myself showing up in court to see what happens, Yoel, you mentioned Court Watch. Yes, sometimes I get annoyed because they'll blow you up on social media, but I need that, right? My ego is irrelevant here. If they are telling me, oh, I'm sorry, DA Rollins, I thought you said these 15 types of crimes weren't going to be prosecuted in the most instances. Let me tell you what's actually happening in your court. Remember, people, my office, I inherited a very talented office who overwhelmingly voted for the number 2 person that I beat. So none of them are happy that I got this job. In addition to police unions and conservative people that are fighting me to get this job, my entire staff is terrified when I walk in the door. And if I had an office of 19 people, yes, could I terminate everyone and bring in 19 people to automatically implement everything? I have 350 employees. I could be a dictator, or I could be somebody who is going to change culture and move. And it requires a little bit of both, right? So that we can actively tell people, no, we aren't waiting any longer. I'm sorry, I'm no longer patient. My people are dying in the streets and we aren't waiting any longer. This change happens right now, or you can find a new job. But I also think we need the court watches. I need to get off of my butt and walk into my multiple different courthouses and see what's actually happening, instead of taking the word of my staff that overwhelmingly is going to say like, everything's great. No, that person is making a complaint and no, that didn't happen that way. And what I say back is, I don't care whether Michael is telling the truth or not. If he is angry enough to pick up the phone and make a complaint, his experience with our office was wrong, right? What I value is the way you felt when you encountered this office, which is the government and which, Michael, your taxes pay for us to do our job. We have to be better at servicing you. But the last thing I'll say is, it is the best part of my job. It's very difficult, but when I speak with families to say, the parole hearing, I testified on behalf of the parole for Sharon Ray, who had murdered a young man named Dakeem when Sharon was 16 and Dakeem was 14. And I called Dakeem's mother to say, I have been asked to write a letter in support of Duran. I need to speak to you before I do that and ask what your reaction to me saying that is. And what I do is, even though my team might put 15 minutes on for that call, if Dakeem's mom needs an hour and 15 minutes of my time, she gets it, okay? My meetings are moved. She testified on behalf of Sharon. I gave her my word I would not submit that letter without reading it to her first. And I wrote a letter that honored Dakeem, but also said that I believe Sharon at 16 is not the same man that he is today in his 30s and has made exceptional movement. But I sat through that 3.5-hour parole hearing because I believe now that that makes me a better DA, that I understand that process and that I read that letter and spoke on behalf of this office. But that's the power of this position, right? And the parole board, many of them said, I don't think we've ever had a DA sit through A, the entire parole hearing, and B, read a letter in support of a parole, right? Because what we do is the easy thing, denied, opposed, right? That's the easy thing. And if that really were the case, that's not using our discretion, right? If the answer is no to everything and appeal everything and everyone's guilty, we don't even need people in the role anymore. We can just have, a machine that does that. We need to start thinking bigger, and you need to be demanding that your DAs are looking into that.
If I could just respond, Devontae, again, in terms of platform, DA Rollins, the platform we have speaks to that in terms of the DA will not oppose parole. The DA may support parole, but the DA will not oppose a parole application. That's in our DA platform.
And remember, families, survivors are always, even when I support a parole, I always have a section, I don't have to, but it is bolded, that I demand that we reach out to the family as the survivors. Because remember, there are, when a homicide happens, when a rape happens, when a violent crime happens, there are two families, and certainly with homicides, and I believe rapes are homicides where the person lived, okay? But sexual assaults and things like that are inextricably tied and forever changed, right? One family is never going to see their loved one again. One is dealing with a loved one and a call that Rachel did the following. And I like to remind people, you can love people and not agree with the decisions or the choices they made or the circumstances they found themselves in. You are always, even the worst of us, are always human and, worth love and are loved by somebody, right? So one of the things too with officer involved shootings, if the officer is harmed, I say either, luckily no officers were harmed, and and my condolences go to the family of Rachel Rollins, who lost her life during this encounter. The first time I did that and mentioned the individual that died in the encounter, all of the police unions went ballistic, right? How dare you? This officer almost, wait a minute. Even if Rachel Rollins was committing 8 crimes when this happened, they're dead and gone right now. It is that sort of us versus them mentality that law enforcement still doesn't understand. If you rang my parents' doorbell, one of their daughters is the DA of Suffolk County. They have a son that's a convicted felon, a daughter that is a convicted. We have a very complicated family, and I am not just the DA of Suffolk County. I have many flaws, right? And my brothers who might have a felony record are exceptional in many other ways. We are all complicated people. But what law enforcement fails to understand is every interaction they have with the community matters, because our community, Helen Jones, is a potential grand juror. And if that sheriff's department and Jackie Lacey are not responsive to you as Helen, when you go in as a grand juror or a trial juror, are you going to believe what a sheriff says to you? Maybe, maybe not. Are you going to believe that the DA's office is beyond reproach and credible? Maybe not, because your lived experience has been negative with those things, and you have every right to those entitlements. But I try to talk more about we're all inclusive. Everything matters in these processes.
Thank you so much. We are running short on time, but part of what we are trying to do and accomplish at Black Futures Lab is build Black political power. And part of us exercising our power is participating in the electoral process. And so we're going to actually be doing a series of voter text banks. Helen mentioned the ones that Dignity and Power Now will be coordinating. But Dallas will drop the link to volunteer if you're interested in helping us build Black political power. We would love to have you join us as a volunteer. And then we also have an electoral action center on our website where folks can register to vote. And if you moved recently, I just moved this weekend, you got to update your registration. So Dallas is also going to drop the link to the Electoral Action Center. You can also find your polling place and other things like that on that Action Center. So we definitely want you all to be engaged in the electoral process. And so now we're going to transition into the question and answer part. And apologies ahead of time. We won't be able to capture every question due to time. But I do want to highlight one where it's kind of connected to the platform. So I'll start with Judge Johnson, and then I want to make sure that Michael can chime in too. But how do you choose a progressive DA? Like, if voters who are trying to go and figure out, how to choose a DA that's on the ballot that represents a vision that's outside of mass incarceration, outside of upholding police abuse, how do you help folks make that informed decision about who they're voting for when it comes to district attorney? I'll start with you.
One of the issues we had when we started this process in New Orleans, the 30 groups and individuals, well, one of the issues we had was whether, in fact, we would eventually suggest to the voters who to vote for, and we came to the conclusion that we would not do that. But what we would do would be to try and present information that New Orleanians could use to determine how to answer that question of, is this person that I choose to vote for progressive? How to answer that question. And the answer to the question from our perspective is in the platform in terms of whether in fact they are in agreement with these things that we have put in the platform. And if in fact they are in agreement with what we have put in the platform, then this is a person you should vote for. But our goal was to try and use that as the way to decide how to answer the question, and not then get caught up in the day-to-dayness of electoral politics. Not to get caught up in it, to get above it. We have just a crap load of organizations in New Orleans, all organized around supporting a candidate, and they do that. We have an entity in New Orleans called the Alliance for Good Government. Well, the Alliance for Good Government actually supports candidates, so that it's kind of a difference for us in terms of setting ourselves outside of that kind of concept and using ourselves to be an informative thing that educates people, and not just as regards November 3rd when this election will happen, but as regards January and going forward after this person swears that they will uphold the law and become a DA. How we can determine in the months that follow whether in fact they are a progressive candidate, and if they are not, we will be able to hold them to task if they're not.
Okay, definitely wanted to see if Michael, you had any thoughts on, I know there's a lot happening in Los Angeles, but how can voters help? How can we help voters think about the elections when it comes to district attorneys?
This is a really hard question. When I first started to engage in DA accountability work in LA, not very long ago, it was like when we first had the race in LA County, it was Rachel Rossi, who kind of reminds me of Rachel Rawling, right? She was a former public defender who was running for DA's office. And then we have Gascon, who was from San Francisco, and of course, Jackie Lacey. And so it was like asking us, because they wanted people to be a part of this candidate debate, that are primarily our neighborhood, like South Central, and our communities aren't really at these tables, right? And so a lot of them are in the West Side, over in other parts of the county that are more privileged class and race wise, right? And so for me, it's like we're asking our people to choose the executioner, right? The same person that executes our community. And so it's hard to pick somebody that's always, the reputation that they have has always been been harmful to our community, right? But hearing also with Gascon and being a part of the DA debates, it's kind of like what Judge Johnson was speaking of. I had the opportunity to ask the DA candidates personally if they would be committed to ending the gang database and ending prosecuting gang enhancements and charging people with gang enhancements. And so I think that's a way that we can engage with the DAs and hold them accountable, and also be a part of the work and the vote. And also it gives the community a sense that, we can make a difference, right? We should be a part of these discussions and debates, and we should show up and vote, because it does affect our communities in great ways.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so we have a couple of questions for DA Rollins. One is about committees. What type of committees do you all have? And how can we kind of replicate some of the committees that has been really impactful for your office? And then there was also a question about what is the discharge integrity unit work that you mentioned before.
So some of the committees are the conviction integrity. So the conviction or the Integrity Review Bureau is one sort of group that we have internally where I've walked through sentencing and conviction integrity and case integrity, where we went through all of those triggering things that occurred, as well as something called the Law Enforcement Automatic Discovery Database, which is our Brady list, which we are up to our eyeballs in right now. And I am speaking with management and law enforcement, as well as all the union leadership, to talk to them about what the future is going to look like in Suffolk County regarding when I need to know about officers' behavior, right? Internal affairs investigations, any arrests, investigations by other agencies into officers. If I am going to be putting up, Officer Johnson on the stand as our witness, and I don't know what his background is, or I, have certain obligations to turn over to the defense, any exculpatory potentially information or any relevant information regarding the witnesses we're putting on, I have to know a lot more about my officers. And in this moment we have now, there's been zero transparency, as far as I'm concerned, with respect to the internal affairs and anti-corruption division parts of the Boston Police Department and others. So one of my groups is the Integrity Review Bureau, as we talked about. Another group is the Discharge Integrity Team. And my background prior to being DA was the chief legal counsel at Massport and some transportation agencies. And I was always fascinated with the NTSB that would send like a group of experts out whenever a transportation accident happened, a plane crashed, a train crashed. And I wanted to do something like that where it wasn't the same, when an officer shot somebody in the past, I would hand a file to Michael. Michael would sit in his office for 3 or 4 years, hand out a report that overwhelmingly said reasonable and justified. So the community heard very little about the investigation for years. And then it was always that the behavior was found to be appropriate by law enforcement. Not to mention, you know, there was no transparency about what the process looked like. We decided to change that immediately. And as I said, 4 external people, a community member who's also a survivor of homicide and runs a community-based health center. So she has trauma-informed experience, criminal defense attorney, retired judge, and an active member of law enforcement. 50% of our discharge integrity team is Black. 25% is of the 4 outsiders are women. I'm the 5th member. And we meet outside of the office. We meet at least once a month. And one of our first actions was me saying that I was going to be presenting to the grand jury an officer that I believe committed a felony. The person lived, but discharged his weapon twice, shot the person in the ankle, and I would argue lied in his police report. And the grand jury returned an indictment. And so we had 4 officer involved shootings that were fatal in 2019. We've had 3 that were non-fatal in 2020. And I inherited about 3 to 5 when I became the DA that nothing had been done about. And it had been 3 years that anyone had done anything on. So our community loses faith in the system when we don't talk to them about what's happening. And to your point, Helen, these are families that are waiting for answers about what happened in the last moment of their loved one's life, right? Even if we disagree and I say this is reasonable or justified, why people of color, poor people, and I mean specifically Black and brown overwhelmingly, is we lose everywhere, right? We don't get the criminal prosecution, and then with qualified immunity or indemnification by mayors, we don't get any civil remedy. And Helen, money will not bring your beautiful son back, but I can tell you that there is something that can be done about the harm. There is at least something that you can say, somebody is responsible now. Maybe I don't get my loved one back, but at least this mattered, right? There is enough for somebody to care enough to listen and hear me, that a jury or a judge, that there was a moment in a day that people had to stop and listen to the harm that we endured as a family, right? To the last moments of my loved one's life. We don't get any of that because we look at Ahmaud Arbery. 3 DAs watched that video of that lynching, right? And looked and said, looks fine. Georgia has a citizen's arrest statute. The McMichaels seem to be completely within their realm of authority. Could you imagine if the races were switched and it was Michael and Yoel and Calvin that were in that car chasing a white man? That was nobody, there wouldn't even be a moment that anyone questioned before the 3 of them would have been arrested immediately. But when we switch it, it's like, well, wait a minute, we don't want to rush to judgment here, you know. And then even the idiot DA, my colleague, that I believe in the George Floyd situation, didn't he make a statement like the African community understands, like doesn't know the difference between Africans and African Americans and is responsible for prosecutions in the criminal legal system, where name me a place where we aren't more represented, right? And as in negatively, right? We are the users of this system and we don't have any of the leadership positions in there. So these systems I'm trying to set up, these committees, give the community a voice, have transparency, and require me to be open and honest about systems that are working or not. But those are the 2 I'm most proud of.
Awesome. So we have reached the hour and a half mark. And I do want to wrap us up, but I want to give opportunity to Yoel and Helen to make any last remarks that you may have to close us off. So let's start with Yoel. Oh, you're on mute.
My bad. I was just saying, thank you everybody for tuning in and for all the panelists for having this conversation. I think it's an important conversation. In California, we have the LADA race, which is the size of like 40 states in November. But in 2022, 56 out of our 58 district attorneys are up for re-election. And that is something that we're gearing up. And, just all I would say is just all power to the people and stay on it. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you. And Helen?
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in and thank everybody on the panel. And for the outvote then that we will be giving, please, if you want to volunteer, add your name to the to chat, your email to chat, and we will get back with you as soon as possible. And everybody, we got to get out and vote. And I hope everybody get out and vote so we can change this system. We can shake this system inside out because it's needed. And we do have to, make sure that these killer cops be held accountable for shooting people in their back, beating people down in their jail cells, covering up murders like they did my son, John Horton, in March 30th, 2009. And nobody has been held accountable. Families shouldn't be able to have to suffer like this because it's just so sad because it's happening all the way around the world. And it is going to take people that care about other people's lives to make this change. And I just say thank you to everybody.
Yeah. And I would like to thank all the panelists for joining the discussion, to lifting up the important work we have to do in educating our communities around the role of district attorneys. And I look forward to stay connected with you all and the important work that you all are doing. We've taken the emails that folks have dropped in the chat, and we're going to definitely send that over to Dignity and Power Now. Definitely check out the forum that the People's DA Coalition is leading out in NOLA. And yeah, continue to build power as we go in towards the election. We're about 41 days out, and so it's important that we continue to have these discussions, talk with our families, talk with our friends, so that we can build the power to make change in our communities. So thanks again for everyone who's joined, and that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
All right, take care, everyone.